It was just another routine traffic stop until it wasn't. A black woman, minding her own business on her way to work, finds herself pulled over by the police. The officers are all business, but there's something off in the air. As they approach, there's an undeniable tension. But then things take an unexpected turn. After a few questions and routine checks, the officers are stunned to learn the truth. She's not just any driver. She's the new boss. The woman they just pulled over is now in charge of the very police department that stopped her. What happens next is something no one saw coming. How will the officers react when they realize the woman they've stopped is their new leader? Stay tuned to find out how power dynamics shift in this jaw-dropping encounter. The woman, named Angela, had spent years working her way up the ranks, proving herself in a system that wasn't always kind to people like her. Growing up in a tough neighborhood, she learned early on how to navigate the complexities of both race and authority. But she never imagined that one day, the very officers who had patrolled her streets would be the ones she'd oversee. As Angela sat in the car, she could feel the weight of the moment. She wasn't just a woman pulled over. She was a symbol of everything that had changed, and everything that still needed to change. The officers, unaware of her promotion, continued to question her, their attitudes shifting ever so slightly as they realized something wasn't quite right. Angela had worked hard for this moment, but now it seemed like fate had thrown an unexpected curveball. How would they take the news? And would they respect her authority? Angela could see the confusion in their eyes as the officers went from checking her license to exchanging uncertain glances. They had no idea who she was, but she could sense their discomfort. It wasn't just about the traffic stop anymore. It was about power, authority, and the role they thought they played in the world. For years, they'd enforced laws without question, but now they were confronted with a challenge they weren't prepared for. Angela had seen the way some of these officers operated in the past. The bias, the disregard for people who looked like her, it had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. But now, as her name echoed in their radios, something shifted. In the distance, the sirens of backup vehicles could be heard. She knew this would complicate things further. The officers were on edge, but Angela wasn't sure if it was because of her position or because they were scared of what this meant for their careers. What would happen to them if they couldn't accept the change? Would they push back, or would they back down? As the tension thickened, Angela's thoughts were interrupted by one officer stepping forward, his voice shaking ever so slightly. You really are a new commander," he asked, disbelief coloring his tone. The others shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact. Angela nodded slowly, her face calm but her heart racing. She wasn't about to let them see her fear. Not now, not when everything she'd worked for was at stake. The power dynamics in that moment were shifting, but it wasn't clear yet who would hold the upper hand. Would she be able to lead a department that had once been a symbol of her oppression? Or would her presence make her a target, caught in the crossfire of old prejudices and new expectations? The air around Angela felt thick with tension. The officers were beginning to gather themselves, but it was clear they weren't sure how to react. Some of them had already stepped back, unsure of how to navigate this strange new reality. Others exchanged whispers, as though trying to make sense of it all. Angela could feel her pulse quicken, the uncertainty rising inside her. She'd fought so hard to be here, to prove herself worthy of this position, but now, standing in front of the very officers who had once patrolled her neighborhood with contempt, she was caught in a storm of emotions, fear, anger, and, for the first time in a long while, doubt. The sirens grew louder, and a few more cars pulled up, adding even more pressure to the situation. Angela knew that once backup arrived, things would escalate fast. She had to take control, But how could she command respect when these officers were still processing the fact that their new leader had been the very person they'd pulled over just moments ago? One officer, a man in his mid-40s with a gruff demeanor, stepped forward. His voice was tight, barely concealing his unease. "We weren't told about any new appointments today," he said, glancing at his colleagues. "How were we supposed to know?" Angela's mind raced, trying to steady herself. She had prepared for this moment, but the reality was much harder to face than she had imagined. She could feel their judgment, their skepticism, weighing heavily on her. She wasn't just their new commander. She was a reminder of everything they had taken for granted. The old guard, the ones who had held the power for so long, had never expected someone like her to rise to the top. Angela had known this moment would come. It had to. But now that it was here, she couldn't help but wonder if she had what it took to break through the walls they had built around themselves. Another officer, younger than the others, was clearly on edge. He kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, glancing between Angela and the senior officer. "We're just supposed to listen to you," he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Angela held her ground. "You listen because it's my job to ensure that the department works for everyone. And that means no more tolerating the things that have been allowed to fester here for far too long." The words hung in the air, thick with challenge. But just as the conversation was about to continue, a sharp voice cut through the moment. "What's going on here?" A new figure had arrived on the scene. Another officer, a higher-ranking one, who had clearly been briefed on the situation. His eyes scanned Angela, and the shift in the atmosphere was instant. The officer smirked, his eyes glinting with disdain. "I'm here to make sure it doesn't." Suddenly, the rest of the officers seemed to close ranks, forming an unspoken alliance, their loyalties pulled in different directions. Angela's leadership was now in jeopardy, and what was supposed to be the start of her new chapter was spiraling into an unpredictable showdown. Would she be able to fight back against this new wave of opposition? Or would this investigation expose cracks in the foundation she had worked so hard to build? Angela took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew what had to be done, but the weight of the situation was unbearable. The officer standing before her, the one with the folder, was part of something bigger, a system that had never intended for her to succeed. But she wouldn't let it defeat her. This was her moment to stand firm, to prove that she belonged here, no matter the opposition. As she stared him down, her voice came out stronger than she felt. "You don't get to decide who's qualified. I'm here because I earned it, because I've seen the flaws in this system. And I'm not backing down." The officer's smirk faltered, just for a second, before he recovered. The tension between them was thick enough to slice. The other officers, still silent, seemed to be waiting for something. What exactly, Angela couldn't say. But she wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing her doubt herself. Just as the standoff seemed to reach its peak, something unexpected happened. The sound of a car door slamming shut echoed through the street, followed by the sharp click of high heels on pavement. Angela turned, her heart skipping a beat when she saw who had arrived. It was another woman, standing tall and confident, with a sharp gaze that matched Angela's own. She was dressed in a similar uniform, but her rank was unmistakable. The new arrival was the chief of police, Angela's direct superior. Her sudden appearance caught everyone off guard, and for a moment there was a stunned silence. The officer holding the folder looked at her, confusion spreading across his face. You weren't scheduled for this stop." The chief didn't miss a beat. "I wasn't. But it seems you've got a problem with our new commander here." Her tone was cold, businesslike. She looked at Angela with a small, reassuring nod. Then her gaze returned to the officers, her voice hardening. "You've been given clear orders. The investigation into Commander